Hello and welcome to this WikiCite session. We're going to talk about Swedish Parliament and Judicial documents and their use. And your host tonight is me, Ainali, and Daniel Eriksson.
Hello.
How are you doing, Daniel?
Very well, thanks. It's a wonderful rainy evening here in Stockholm.
All right. We have had a pleasant day here, like a little bit first of an autumn day here in Amsterdam. So what we're going to talk about today is quite of a long project, but we're still just in the midst of it, I would say. We have so much ideas, but it's about this golden treasure of the open data portal of the Swedish Riksdag, the Parliament of Sweden. But before we go into the depths of that, we want to give you a little bit of introduction to how we got started. And before we go into depth, I want to give you some sort of housekeeping things. So everything today, we have the WMF, the Wikimedia Foundation Friendly Space Policy that we adhere to. So please be friendly towards each other in the chats. And we have the chats activated here, both on YouTube and on Periscope, and we're also streaming this to the Swedish Wikipedia group, Facebook group. So you can all comment there and we'll see it and can bring it up. And we have already had like a friendly hi all from Phoebe here. So please ask us questions during this entire session, because I think there are things that you might want to know more of that we have so internalized we don't even bring it up because we have been thinking and talking about this a lot.
Yeah, there might be a lot of special peculiarities with how the Swedish system works that we don't quite think about, that not everyone knows.
Yeah, and we have learned a lot about the Swedish peculiar system when we have digging into this, and I think that's almost like it's everything when you go into Wikidata and think, I know this topic, I can model this. And then, of course, you see, no, it's much more complicated in reality. And what else do we have? So you can comment directly where you're watching, but if you rather want to, you can also comment in the Telegram group for WikiCite. And yeah, that's about it. So let's dive into the introduction of Swedish project. I'm going to share my screen here. This is the share screen. So Wiki Project Sweden. I guess most of you people know about wiki projects in general. And WikiCite is, of course, kind of a wiki project. But when we started here, it turned out that there were already a lot of things done in regards to Wikidata and Sweden. And I guess most of the countries have this kind of properties country box where you can see the properties that are available to you and related to your country. And that's sort of where we started. But when we started to get into the nitty-gritty of things, we saw that there were already things being done before we even got here. So one of the first thing is this sub-project from the wiki project Every Politician, which is, of course, a much larger project that started years ago and which a much larger scope, like trying to get every politician onto Wikidata. And see if it loads here. Yes. And we have this little bit of tracker here. And I think we have just gotten up to 2 stars here on Sweden during this, because one of the first things we wanted to do before actually going anywhere was to get all the parliamentarians into this. And we're going to meet some of the people who have been in that process as well. And the most complicated things about that was that most of the politicians already had an article on Swedish Wikipedia, but their Wikidata items weren't very good at all. So we had to improve them. And that was tough because since they had some data, it was hard to run a bot, because it's easier if there's no data, you can just add in everything. So we did a lot of work by hand to get that up and running.
How did you solve that? Oh. I think we may have just lost Jan.
And I think I just exited the stream there.
Good to have you back.
Yeah.
I was trying to ask what you would do to solve, but maybe that's going a bit or too fast into what we were going to talk about later. But how did you solve the problem of disambiguating or not adding duplicate politicians?
No, I think that's a great question to start with, because that's where what you run into in the beginning. And luckily, in the Swedish open data set, there's an identifier for the parliamentarians, which has been of great help to actually point like this is exactly this one, because of course you have a few parliamentarians with the common Swedish names, so you can have 3 or 4 with the same name, but they've been there over the years. So that helped us a lot to get started. And then let's see if I can get back to share my screen here again. This is where we were. Yes. So that's sort of where we got started. And this actually started last year about this time. And I thought I can do this by hand and be done by Christmas. And it took a little bit of a longer time than that. But eventually we got it done. And then it was easier to backfill with the rest. And then when we had the politicians there, it also seemed easier to start adding more things to it. And that's where we actually got into starting a wiki project. And of course, we weren't the first trying to do a wiki project for a country. So we copied proudly the design from Wiki Project India and just customized it with our colors and made a logo for ourselves. And that's in our background here. And then we started with some plans and ambitions, like what do we want to do with this project and how can we collaborate? And a few people joined. And we actually started a Telegram group just so that we could chat in Swedish and not spam the general Wikidata group with all our nitty-gritty details, because there are always a lot of nitty-gritty details. And then when we had something like, oh, this is a larger question that is relates to more countries or all the countries, then we bring it up to the general Wikidata group, or going on Wiki and having a discussion, or going to a property talk page.
I think having a place to shout out ideas or questions in a sort of more it's the live fashion almost, right? Or having fast real-time answers is very helpful when you're stuck on something and you need advice. So it's been a very good catalyst, I think, for getting some of this work done that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I'm going to mark a few of these. These projects were already related to Sweden and existed before we started this project. So there had been projects in specific topics. Some of them quite large, because the Wiki Loves Monuments, that includes like 150,000 monuments. So that's quite a big one.
The working life museums, right?
Yeah. But this one, now we could actually join forces, everyone who had some sort of common thing about Sweden, to some interest. And these are the two things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Riksdag documents and the court decisions. And of course, here are all the things we have. Do you have anything, thoughts in general, Daniel, on how this overviewing project has helped us?
So I think, I mean, it's been a place to sort of showcase, I guess, what is happening around Sweden-related topics in general, and to bring together sort of, I would say, dispersed group of projects that have some kind of relationship to Sweden that were a little bit overall on Wikidata. And I think it is mainly, I think, this is working as a showcase where people can get ideas for, oh, someone has done this already, but what if I were to do something similar, but with this other data set or with this other group of objects?
Yeah. And then, of course, we have had this project page to talk on. We've had this Telegram group in Swedish, which makes it very easy for us because, as you can hear, we're not native English speakers. This is our second language. So as soon as we go into details, especially when you go into details about the parliamentarian processes, like it's tricky even for a Swede knowing the difference of utredningsbetänkande, like inquiry reports and other kinds of documents, what they actually are. So falling back into your native language has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to keep the discussions on Wiki in English to, I guess, to share our thoughts and ideas with other people who might be interested in seeing them, but having a place off Wiki where we can discuss that in our native language has definitely helped.
Yeah, and of course, doing it on English on Wiki has also helped because we have had gotten a lot of help from other people discussing how we should use different kind of properties. I think one of the biggest thing was that after getting all our parliamentarians on there, the way we connected them and their offices to the party they represented, we used the wrong property for that in the beginning. So we used the member of party where we should use the parliamentary group. And the nuances in the labels in Swedish made it really unintuitive for a Swede to know this is not applicable to us. And then after discussing, like, no, but every other country using it in that way. So perhaps we should just change the label in Swedish to make you understand. And of course, that makes querying a lot easier afterwards. And I think we will get back to that a little bit later, how that is, of course, a factor in everything. So just quickly going through this project before we move into the other things. Yes. So what I was going to say, besides the Telegram group and being on Wiki, we have also doing online editathons, but not really editathons. We have more like having online meetings to discuss, because we haven't edited much, have we, Daniel, during this?
No, it's been very little editing.
Yeah, but we meet, like, having a steady time each week, just sitting down and chatting a little bit, well, like what happened and what are ideas. Sometimes that unlocks so much of the things that are hard to express in words, especially when you come into the complex things of qualifiers and modeling.
And I think also, even if the chat is great, I think talking, well, not face-to-face, but at least on a video meeting, that you can maybe faster iterate or come up with new ideas faster in that setting.
Yeah.
Someone's stuck.
Yeah. So let's head into our first topic of today, which is it the court decisions we're starting with?
I believe so.
Yes. Do you want to share the screen?
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea. But perhaps I can give some introduction just to what it is, even without sharing the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to put court decisions on Wikidata, right? So Sweden is a bit different from some countries that, well, the one that I know mostly perhaps is the US, which you hear a lot about in the news because the Supreme Court in the US is rather powerful and important. But the Swedish Supreme Court is maybe a bit more anonymous, but it's still quite important and has in recent years, I think, taken a bit more of a or using its power and actually setting precedent where before they maybe would not want to step in where the law is unclear or ambiguous. Now they actually step in and say, this is what we believe the law should be. And if the legislative branch is not happy with that, they will have to change the law. So they have a little bit changed the way they do things. And it's kind of interesting to be able to look at some of those patterns, right? And of course, what I looked at was as well the US. So on Wikipedia, pretty much every Supreme Court case, I think, in the US has a Wikipedia page already. Not everything is modeled great in Wikidata, perhaps, but there are some of them that are modeled out. So I'll show you one of the more famous, perhaps, US Supreme Court cases. Have you already put my screen up?
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, so this is quite a famous case, right? The Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which is, I think, about, probably some American is going to tell me I'm wrong here, but I think it's about how companies can finance campaigns in elections. And specifically, it said that corporations do have the right to free speech, and financing a campaign in elections is free speech, according to U.S. law. Or the U.S. Supreme Court, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what this case said in a nutshell. And if we go through quickly what it is, maybe I should change this to
English. So yeah, that'll help our viewers, perhaps.
Indeed. Of course, it's got an instance of a Supreme Court decision. For some reason, there are two instances of here. Maybe someone should look into that. What is the difference between a Supreme Court case and a Supreme Court decision? I'm not sure. So it has a country and the jurisdiction. It has a publication date, obviously. It has some significant events that are all the oral arguments and the decision dates. It's got a citation, and this is how you would, if you write a text about this decision, how would you refer to it? So this is getting into the interesting stuff for WikiCite. And there are often, for legal texts and court decisions, there are ways to refer that are rather standardized. And in the case of the US Supreme Court, there are a number of ways you can refer to a court case depending on which I think publisher you are using for your. Mm-hmm. I think these are duplicates, right?
Probably, yeah.
You should probably.
No, they're different. There's a space in between there.
Is there a space? Okay. Maybe I should not. You should leave that to someone else who knows better than I do. So it has a court, right? And then it's published in the United States reports. It's got even a commons category, apparently. It's quite a famous decision. It's got a majority opinion that was written by Anthony Kennedy here.
All right.
Who was
that also has a reference there.
Indeed. So apparently the Supreme Court dated this. And then there are a few other identifiers in the page on Wiki. But there's also quite a lot, if someone is curious, there's also quite a lot of other information on the Wikipedia page that you could actually bring in and cite on there. For example, there are a lot of opinions on this that we're going to talk about a bit a bit later. How we actually modeled the opinions.
Yeah, I think Phoebe are one step ahead of us here.
Yeah, indeed. No, so that was a US example, and so I looked at that and stole quite a lot of the modeling. I guess there's one more thing that is not actually showcased on this item, which is how you model the different opinions.
Yeah.
But then I went to sort of, okay, what can we do for Sweden here, right? So what is the data source for this? Well, there is the Supreme Court website, and this is all in Swedish, but let's open up one and look at it. Anyway, I think I'm gonna search for one that is from last year, just because that makes life a bit easier to show something. See, so these are all the different decisions, right? We can maybe pick one that with a funny name, perhaps. Trying to see if I find something interesting, but maybe not. Maybe about a leaking roof.
The leaking roof. All right. Yeah. Sounds very interesting.
So this was a question about the responsibility for correcting a problem in an apartment where there was some damage both to the apartment and to another part of the house. So who was responsible for paying what? So typical, litigation around who pays what, and probably some insurance companies involved here. So this is the sort of website that I had to work with when it comes to sources. And this is the website, and then you have a link to the PDF, which contains the full written decision. And of course, for 2019, and I think a few years back, you have a little bit of actual data here on the side, which helps. So there's the laws applied, there is a name that is given by the court to the case, there is a case number, and there's a few keywords that are sort of helpful. So one of the first things I did was just to sort of scrape this website and scrape the name, and this is what we talked about, the legal citation. So this is how you would refer to this case in Swedish legal text, as legal scholar. But then pretty soon I realized that this information is not that great. So we actually have to go and look at the final case.
Now you're not sharing that view.
How do I share the PDF?
You'll have to share again. Stop this sharing and share a new one.
This one. There it is. Of course. So here you go. So here's the written case then. And it's got some interesting information here. So one of the things that I really wanted to get at is actually down here. At the very bottom, it says, in this decision have been taking part the justices Anders Eka, Ingemar Persson, Sten Andersson, Erik M. Runesson, and Cecilia Renfors. So these are the judges that took part in this decision. So this is a bit of a Swedish court, perhaps, that not like in the US, where the whole court always decides in the full chamber of 9 justices. In Sweden, there are typically 5 justices that decide one case. And the court has, I think, 16 or so justices, and they are specialized in 2 different departments, one about criminal cases and one about civil cases. And they tend to only decide decisions in the cases within their area, except for a few very special decisions where they overturn a part of previous precedent, where they would actually have a full chamber of all the 16 justices that decided together. And then there's another peculiar thing here, which is it's called referent in Swedish, or maybe a reporter or rapporteur or reporting judge in English, which is the justice that is in charge of that case. And so that's also something we wanted to record. And then let's try if I can be more a little bit faster this time. So if we go back then to actually look at this case, we can search for it. So the name is available on Wikidata. To search for it, it's the name of the item, of course. And so here we can see what the decision from the Swedish Supreme Court would look like once it was imported then. So we have it's a decision of the Supreme Court of Sweden. It's got a title, which is set by the court. So we consider this the official title. And if for some cases that are older that was not given a title by the court, we just put this as no value to indicate that. So that way we don't get, for example, problems when we add citations to these documents. Otherwise we would get a constraint violation because the document doesn't have a title. It's got a language, a publication date, the citation, so some of the things you've seen. And then I've added here which are the judges that were part of deciding that case, and we've added a little qualifier here for the reporting judge. I guess published in is kind of interesting. It's published in a special volume of a yearbook of this court that is called Mitt Juridiskt Arkiv. So we can these actually have ISBNs and stuff, so they are modeled like a typical edition object. You have a link to this PDF as well. We have a majority opinion here. So this has part majority opinion, and here we come to the different types of opinions. So in this case, all the 5 judges agreed, or justices agreed, and they all ruled the same. So they all joined this opinion. There's not really information about who wrote an opinion in the court. So we don't have an author on these in Sweden. And then we have added some citations here also, which we're going to talk about much more in depth how we did later. But these are citations to Q items, which I think probably represent other legal texts that we're also going to talk about later. So the actual draft legislation that was going through Parliament, for example. We also got a special Supreme Court case number, which is a special identifier for all these cases we can use to get back to that website we saw earlier on the court. That was a brief overview. John, do you have any questions? Do we have any questions from the audience or anything?
We have some general discussion about court cases and how they could be modeled in like the case and the decisions. And to be clear, then we have mostly been working with the actual decisions in this import. And you were about to start with that, but what we were starting to dream about why start with the court decisions is that we realized that since they are so important, they start sort of a chain reaction because the Supreme Court is the ruler of how a law is gonna be interpreted, and then it might lead to politicians wanting to change the law if it doesn't go in the way that you thought it would be or how it was supposed to be, or times has changed since the law was written, perhaps by technology or society. And here we started to imagine like, all right, so this could be the start which feeds into a political process. And this is where the parliamentary documents will take on.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we've seen, I think, a few cases in the last years now where these, as I said, the court has made decisions where the law is ambiguous, and then has sort of more or less told the legislature, the legislative branch, that you should fix this.
Yeah. And do you have any examples of things these refer to or from?
Maybe. I was thinking of looking at these opinions, but we can see. Do you mean a court case referring to something? Not citations, but...
Yeah, or maybe we take that in the second session with the actual citations.
I had otherwise these sort of cause and effect things. I think.
Yep.
The example I was thinking about now is a bit too recent, so I don't think we have that modeled. But there was just a few weeks ago a case of a court decision that led to the government starting an inquiry into the change.
Yeah.
But this is an example of something a bit more difficult when it comes to modeling the different opinions. And this is a model that I did not draft. It was drafted for the US Supreme Court cases, and I just stole that proudly. So we got majority opinion. Here there were two justices that agreed on the majority opinion, which is the main body of the text. And then there were two justices that had a dissenting opinion. That meant that they wanted to rule differently in the case. And they have a special opinion supporting that. And then you have a concurring opinion, which another justice had, which means that they agree with the decision, but they don't agree with the reasons that were given. So they have another way to get to the same result.
All right.
And then there's another peculiar thing here, which is called an addendum, which is often written but sometimes written by the justices to sort of either clarify their own position or why they voted in a specific way, or they want to tell the legislator that they think this ought to be fixed. So that's, for example, Stefan Lindskog, who is the former Chief Justice. He was kind of famous for writing these opinions to the legislator saying that you should fix this. So he wrote actually quite a lot of those.
All right. So hopefully they will show up when we're getting farther into this project.
Yeah. And I guess maybe we can talk a little bit about the challenges of importing. You already saw that this was a PDF file that we were reading this from. So I actually didn't want to go through all of these hundreds of cases, about 100 cases every year, I think the court hears. I didn't want to go through all of those by hand and adding the justices. So as with the politicians, one of the first things I did was actually just make sure that the whole history of justices on the Supreme Court was correct in Wikipedia. And I had quite a lot of help from the Swedish Wikipedia page that had a very nice list article that I could basically scrape and import to Wikidata. So wherever a justice was red linked on Wikipedia, I sort of could almost guess that it would not have a Wikidata item either. And so that helped me get them in there, and it had also the period of time they were on the court and so on. So I got quite a lot of information for free that way. So once I'd done that, I could write a little bit of a script that would go through and scrape those PDFs. It was a bit tricky because those PDFs, they aren't written to be machine readable, and there's slight variations in style how you write it, and it has varied a little bit over time. So there was quite a lot of trial and error, and in the end, I got about I think a 5 to 10% error rate on them. So I would still create most of the information about the case in the item, but there might be that the justices were not included, or there was not all opinions were given justices that joined them, and so on. So it would just let my script spit that out in the log for me, and then I would sit and work through that log file after I've uploaded like 5 years worth of cases or something, and just manually go through that file. So instead of having to do 100 cases a year, I could do maybe 5 or 10 and just parts of them manually. So that helped quite a lot. And I used Wikidata Integrator and a custom script for doing that, essentially.
And I think we also almost skipped a little bit of a step here, because you touched upon it when you mentioned modeling, but I can really recommend using some sort of template or a table. And there are these different kinds that you can use. Now I'm zooming in too much. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So
yeah, maybe I skipped that because I myself did not know about this when I did it. So
no, so this is a place where collaboration on Wiki is really helpful, because here we can sketch out how we think we should model this based both on the data that we have and also on how we're seeing the properties being used on other places on Wikidata. And it's also a great place for other people to find and come with suggestions.
And as I said, I think I actually sketched this out partly after the fact, or after I started my imports, but yeah, it was quite useful.
Yeah.
And then we have something else that is useful below that, right?
Yes, this is a great tool called Integrality, which helps you keep track of data. And here we're still trying to figure out what tables are most useful for us, but we added a few that we thought were going to be interesting, like which laws apply to these court cases, are they citing other work? And here you can see quite a lot of these cases actually do cite other work. And then, of course, main subject, which can help you find topic areas of things. And yeah,
we still, you can see that we still have some work left to do on the classification.
Yeah. And here we see the sum so far then of the number of court cases or decisions. And with that, I think, should we move on to the parliamentary documents?
Yeah, that sounds like a good point.
All right, and we'll say hello to Robin as well.
Hello, Robin.
You're still muted.
Sorry. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi. So we started in the end where we had the parliament, the judicial documents, and then of course we had this big, huge treasure trove of open data from the Riksdag. So you made most of these imports. So can we start to dig into that a little bit?
Well, my computer did most of the imports, but
yeah.
Where to start? So I think I got involved with this. I was actually looking for originally for a data set of all members of parliament for Sweden from 1867 till today. So 1867 was when we got our sort of modern parliament with two chambers as opposed to the current unicameral one, but still. And I couldn't find any up-to-date and clean source for that, so I started looking, and my boss actually had heard of this thing called Wikidata, and I took a look and I found some interesting items, but when I learned enough to actually query Wikidata, I realized that most of it was missing. So I spent a lot of time adding those, and then eventually my path crossed with you guys,
yeah,
the other people in Wiki Project Sweden, and then once I was sort of finished, we're still missing a few people here and there, especially the old members of parliament. But once that work was sort of finished, we started talking about importing all of these documents once we had that base where we could connect the documents to people. I think that was somewhere late this spring when that work started. Yeah. So maybe I can share my screen and give a bit of background.
Yeah.
So should be this button, share screen, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Let's see. Okay, so I pick, let's see here.
You can pick a window or a tab or your entire screen, but I don't recommend that.
Okay, so I'll, let me
Too
see
many
what
tabs.
happens. Yeah, maybe. Can you see?
Yep, an example bot.
Ah, great. So let's see here. So in Sweden, the data situation is actually pretty good. Well, I'm not that familiar with other countries, but compared to other data sources, the parliamentary data is pretty good, especially the recent data. Once you get back to, I'd say like the 80s, 70s, and further back, then it starts to deteriorate. But this open data portal from the Swedish Riksdag, the parliament, is the source of truth for all of these documents. I can just show you. You have all of these. So this is the page for all the documents.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned before, you have all of these very specialized terms for these documents that you might not even be familiar with as a Swedish-speaking person, but we've come to learn them as we've gone along. So we have reports, we have
minutes,
questions,
written questions,
written questions, and verbal questions, and motions from members of parliament, and bills, and everything you can imagine. And so we've imported most of this now. I think we've imported like 10 different categories of documents, the most basic ones. I'm not sure if we'll do the rest. Some of these are very
is
maybe
that page
not that
available
central.
in English?
But no, I don't think so. I can only find.
If you go,
it's in English in the corner.
Where do we end up? Perhaps some.
Yeah.
We don't end up anywhere. Oh no, Robin lost his internet. Don't push the English button.
I think we can reiterate that Robin has been, or that the Riksdag's open data portal is really good, and that they have this available and in high quality has really been what has enabled us to do this. A lot of this. And maybe the reason it works so well is that they use pretty much the same APIs themselves, as far as I understand, to actually program the website of the parliament.
Yeah, they do a little bit like how Wikipedia are doing with this app, with their app. They're actually using their APIs themselves to build it, which makes sure it's usable. And what's also been a great enabler is that they were very clear about the license of the open data being CC0. And then, of course, a lot of the content itself is not copyrightable. It's there are things in the copyright law that exempts the actual motions and the bills and the different kinds of text. I think there are 2 or 3 different exempts. And now we'll see if Robin comes back here. Something? No. Oh no. So let's see. I'll bring this up for now and move on and hope that Robin comes back. Where did we have it? Yes, the Riksdag documents. And I think here we have some things in English in the contents here. You can see we have motions, we have bills, reports, interpellation. Maybe actually it's, no, I have it in Swedish here. No, I don't. It's still strange. inquiry reports, written questions.
Might
And
not
then
have
I
used-
think the page actually breaks down because we have too many templates and too many properties or calls for things. And now it looks like we do have Robin back here. Let's let him in. Hello.
Hi. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, let's see if this if it works better.
Was it the English button that broke it?
No, I think it was just the router.
All right.
Went in there. Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. So as I was saying, data situation is quite good. They have this API. You can visually inspect it here in this data portal. I'm not gonna show this too much because it's all in Swedish, but here you have
sharing it again. We lost it.
Oh, right.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Great. So here we have all of these categories that I mentioned. You have the written questions, the propositions, the motions, and so on and so forth. And the numbers here indicate the number of documents in each category. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So what we did essentially was, like you mentioned, Jan, I think you were the driving force behind this. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it's a group effort. But we started modeling these different types of documents. Here we have the motions, so sort of bills from the members of parliament, either from individual members or from parties or groups of members. And we sort of sketched out which properties should be modeled for these documents. Obviously, there you have things like what instance of value should they have. And for these documents, we also have the authors for every motion. Basic stuff that you'd expect, like title, so forth. And then we, just like Daniel mentioned, I'm using something called a Wikidata integrator, which is a Python library. So sort of a code that other people have written to facilitate further coding. And using that, I prepared, I can show you my sort of workspace here. So this is my workspace. These are called notebooks. I won't go into the technical details of this, but it's essentially documents with code that you can annotate with text and so on. So I created one of these notebooks for each type of document. And they look very similar, but since the properties sort of differ from category to category, they're not identical. But maybe I can just show you very briefly. I don't want to go into the too much technical details again, but just very on a high level, this is something that I basically copied my notebook for the propositions, so the bills from the government. So what I do here is I use this Wikidata integrator library to log in, just as you would in your web browser, but programmatically here. And then I use this Riksdagen API to fetch all of the documents that are of type proposition and from the 2020 to 2021 session of the Riksdag. So I download all of that, and then we can inspect it. It looks like this. You have a bunch of different columns. Most of these are empty, as they're trying to sort of standardize the format of these documents across all types of categories. So not all of these columns are relevant for every type of document. And for this particular query, I got 40 results. that is 40 propositions from the Riksdagen that started, what was it, a month ago?
Yep.
Then we do some basic cleaning of this data. Here I'm adding a series, and the series here is the propositions of this session, as I said. We remove some junk, that the data is good, but it's not perfect. And then we make a query, a SparkQL query to Wikidata to fetch all of the existing propositions from this session. That's what I'm doing here. And then I'm sort of removing the ones that are already imported from my local copy. And then we end up with 16 documents that should be imported. And then we get into this mess. This looks, it's essentially, so this is the main function that packages all of this together. Essentially, every row is a statement. So here I'm saying that the P31, the instance of property, has the value blah, 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 which is proposition.
And is this sort of the place where you turn the table we saw earlier from the wiki page into your code?
Exactly. So I'm basically copying this huge function from category to category, just replacing the properties that should differ between them. And also adding references and qualifiers here. Then we end up with data that is ready to be imported. Daniel showed me a neat trick where you can assign this a unique identifier for a specific batch, for a specific group of imports, so that if something goes wrong, you can actually go back and ask an administrator, I think, to delete the whole thing. Sort of, it's a good safety web. And then I thought I'd actually just run this, and hopefully it works. I'm just adding.
We're doing some live importing here.
So just adding one proposition. And let's go to my contributions. Here we go. So no label for English. Unfortunately, we were not able to automatically translate these to English. But yeah, it's okay. This one is a boring example. I couldn't foresee which one it was.
No. So this is the extension of the temporary
measures to
make it easier to have your annual gatherings in companies and non-profits. And I think this is caused by the COVID-19 and the pandemic.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah.
So you can have a digital annual general meeting for
this is just possibly, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you want to know more, we also add links to the original documents in 3 formats: XML, HTML, and PDF. I won't show it because it's all in Swedish, but and just like you mentioned, Jan, we also have these hugely helpful, unique identifiers for every single document coming from Riksdagen. So we can easily make sure that we don't insert duplicates and so on. And these actually also take us to, if I click this, takes me to the actual documents if I want to read it. Yeah. So as I said, we have about 10 categories thus far imported. I'm not sure how many documents there are in total, but it's in the hundreds of thousands at least. And we're getting to a stage now where things are becoming really interesting, I think, where we are linking all of these documents together, not only the documents, but also people with their positions and so on. And these tables that you showed, Jan, are also very helpful in that work. We can quickly see where certain subsets of this data is missing.
And they're also very nice to see when we actually go in and do some edits. You see these tables are getting updated. It's quite satisfactory.
Very. Every Sunday at 2 or something.
Is that when the bot runs?
I think so, yeah.
All right. I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of details but I think I'll stop there for any questions. Or
let's see, we don't have any specific comments yet from the web. I'll look in our Telegram group. It doesn't seem. Yes, so we have a question there, like, can we add the has immediate cause and this COVID-19 outbreak in Sweden to this proposition? And here's a little bit of a tricky thing, because this causality, which is quite interesting and is something that almost got us started, where we wanted to see, does the court decision goes to inspire some politicians to make a move, or to the government to make a bill? You have both things, and sometimes you have the written questions where some politicians, based on a court case or something else in the world, trying to put some pressure onto the government, like, hey, we need to do something in this area. But then, of course, you can if you stop back to the table again, you can see here we have a different kind of causes. So we have the has cause, has immediate cause, and has contributing factor. And this is the way, sort of the triple layer of causality that Wikidata has prepared for, where the weakest link has contributing factor, where it means like, well, this was part of it, but it wasn't the actual thing that made it do it. And then you have the little bit stronger, which is the has cause, and which is, well, this was the major thing that caused this to happen. And then you have the has immediate cause, which is it's exactly this item that made the next thing happen. And trying to figure out there which are going to be used is not entirely simple all the time.
And I thought also that has cause was a super property of the other two. Is that it, or was that the wrong thinking on my end? Do you know?
I think it's sort of a super property, because I think they both are linked up. But when you go to the Wikidata causality page, it's described also as being like in the middle of these two, which makes it a bit hard. But we have been using has immediate cause quite a lot, and I think we're going to get back to that later, because you're going to show a little bit with that, Daniel.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to show that specifically.
Okay, all right. No, but we have some of these happening, because in this chain of the parliamentary documents, do you have? I might have some example here. I think we're going to show how this actually. This might be it. So this is an inquiry report that got imported, and I think this is going to have. Well, these are added manually as contributing factor, because these are hard to do by bot. You actually have to read the text. And then we have some sites here. We didn't have any of these direct, but some of them are actually linked, like this is a directive that causes the next step in the process, and we have that linked.
Yeah. And another property that I think we have for all of these types of documents, which is a super interesting one, in my opinion, is the main, I'm not sure what the English label is, but the main theme.
Yeah, the main subject, I think.
Main subject, exactly. Which is also next to impossible to automate, but there are like semi-automatic ways of doing that by searching for certain keywords from the title. I think once we get more and more of these main subject statements, then that will lead to some very interesting analysis when you can break it down by party and year and author and so on.
Yeah. Because one thing you could do already today would be to look at which legislative committees these motions ended up in, and you could actually see which area of policy each party most often would motion about.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess, but there's a lot of like once these bot imports have been executed, or whatever the word is, there's still lots and lots of quite fun tasks, but it's a bit overwhelming with the sheer quantity of the documents. But adding these causality statements and the main themes and so on. And for the really old documents, you have to sort of look up manually the authors, because they're so often misspelled, or not misspelled, but the OCR process when the Riksdagen themselves sort of scan these documents, they're of quite poor quality. But the bright side is that there's lots of more fun work to do.
Yeah. And this is an inquiry report, and those are special in both that they are quite extensive in length, but also that the ones who are writing them are actually good at citing other work. So here we can see, I think these I've added actually mostly manually by reading it. But we can see that they're actually both referring to other reports. Those that are Q numbers here, I think, are mostly other parliamentarian documents and other like inquiries, previous work from the Riksdag. But I think we'll see some more example of that later in Daniel's citations session. We had a little plan, like, should we go through a couple of these, like looking at specific items to see what we actually find? So this was one of the inquiry reports. And most of these, they are part of a series, which is quite easy to keep track of them, but I guess it also, you import them in those kind of batches.
Yes. So most of them are grouped by, so the Swedish Riksdag begins in September and ends in, well, I guess September.
Yeah.
So it goes, it's sort of like the school year. But certain documents like laws, I believe, are not part of the Riksdagen session in the same way. They're more from a specific year.
Yeah.
That's sort of the machinery.
Yeah. And did you pick out any specific motion to show off? Should we go with the...
I thought we'd show the one
we used here in
modeling. Exactly.
So let's see if I can scroll that far. So this is our first
modern plotting.
Yes. So here we added the one in English for your convenience. And of course, it's a bit what do you call it? Different in that we have different kinds of motions as well.
Yeah, exactly. So in Sweden, I'm not sure if this is an international phenomenon, but you have these basic categories, individual motions, which are written by a single member of parliament, and then you have committee motions from a given committee in the Riksdag, and then party motions from where all the authors are from the same party. I think those are the ones, right?
Yeah.
Follow-on motions, or did you mention it?
Yeah, sorry, follow-up motions as well, which are motions that MPs can submit after the government has submitted a proposition. They can sort of follow up on that.
Yeah.
And Sweden is a bit special in that we limit quite a lot how individual MPs can bring proposals in specific topics. It's just a limited window of time where they can bring any kind of proposal.
Yeah, that's what's so special. That's what's so special about this, that we usually in a year, I think it's like 3,000 or 4,000 is the average is around there. And basically 90% of them come in a 2-week window during the so-called general motion period, I think it's called.
And probably 99% of those are just dismissed, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, I just pulled that from nowhere.
No,
but
I think
a very large majority of them are dismissed.
Yeah. And I think that has also been one of our big challenges with the motions, because when we started this, we thought, oh, it will be very easy to see this motion get through this committee, and then it turns into a law, or something like that. Like, it's a very easy process, but it turns out the reality is not that simple.
No.
So each motion can have several different, I'm not sure what it's called, some sort of statements of what they want to achieve. And the parliament can say no to everything or yes to everything, but it can also say, well, you can get these two, but not this one, if it's 3. And it can also say, you don't get any of them completely, but you can get half of the first one, which means it's very hard to model.
I think the committee could even write their totally own proposal if they don't like what is being proposed.
Indeed. So I think, did we start with the motions? That was the first.
Yeah, I think that was the first one.
Big batch. And there are about 140,000 of these in Wikidata right now. I would guess.
Think those are also the most easily comprehensible, because many people, well, I'm speculating here, but this is my theory, that many MPs know that these motions won't get passed, but it's sort of a way to signal, this is an issue that concerns me, or I think we should pay more interest to. But so they're quite basic, if that's the right way to put it. They're very concrete in their subject.
It's also something that the press has done for a long time, just ranking the local MPs by how many proposals they write, and trying to say that this means, or this is some kind of measure of how active they are as MPs. I'm not sure that is a very useful measure, but it's easy for the press to do.
Yeah. But the problem there, one of the many problems, is that many MPs submit the same motion year after year, actually. Not quite sure why that is, but...
I think it's with what you said there. It's a signaling thing. Like, they want to show their constituents that this isn't. I was voted in on this, and I'm still going to pursue it, even if I didn't succeed with this year. I'm going to go on. I actually looked into one of these doing things by hand adding topics, and you can see over a 4-year time, I actually read all of these for each year, and they improved, actually. Like, adding citations over the years, getting better arguments, and so yeah, some will just copy and paste, but some actually learn things over the time as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Where would you want to go next? What kind of?
Maybe proposition, I think, was the next category that we tackled.
Was that before or after? I think. Let's see.
I can maybe show you send you a link.
Yes. Where are you sending it? There. Thank you. Too many windows here. So I'll add it here. Yes.
Yeah. So these are very similar to the motions. I mean, they're both types of bills, but one is coming from members of parliament, the other is coming from the government. But they share many of the same properties. This one.
Here we actually have some immediate cause. Yes, so this is almost like a follow-up motion, which says, due to this bill, I'm writing this motion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, and here we also see the copyright status. So we model the actual paragraphs from the Copyright Act into the Wikidata to be able to refer to it easily.
Yeah.
Oh, and cites quite a lot. Citations that you made, Daniel, or your bot.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It looks so dry in English. I always use the
Swedish yeah. It's a tough work going through like all these 200,000 adding English labels by hand.
Yeah. It's a future project.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just take a look at interpolations. So verbal questions. Let me see if I have an example. Those are kind of interesting in that we have the person writing the question and also the person answering the question. And we're planning on writing or on importing the answers as well. So you can follow the chain in that direction as well. Let me just see if I can find the one with an English label. I had it open. Here we go. Charging electric cars.
All right. So I'm going to see if I can search for that even. Charging. This one.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the one being addressed.
Exactly. So it's usually, well, it's always a minister, right?
Yeah.
Member of the cabinet.
And here's the author of the actual question. Ooh, and this is nice.
Oh, right. Yeah. This we have for most interpolations. So these verbal questions. We have a link to the debate where you can actually watch the debate in video format. That's nice.
Yeah, it took us a while figuring out that URL because it wasn't described in the API documentation. So we had to dig a little bit in the actual source of the pages because, of course, they are using the API to build the pages. So we knew it's in there somewhere, but we couldn't find it first. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's the structure of the parliamentary data is really good, but the documentation is sometimes lacking. And if you're lucky, you can get hold of a person that is willing to help you. But sometimes they're not super interested.
Yeah. So here we could actually add, if we wanted to, not main
I guess
subject.
a lot of these are also caused by some kind of recent events, right?
Yes, they are. And I wonder if this was not it.
Of course, not all recent events have Wikidata items necessarily.
No, that of course. Yeah, so I tried to dig up. I think this might be another interpolation here, which is interesting to us. This is a question about the legal status of digital encyclopedias with public art, which we can see here followed. It has a main subject of freedom of panorama, and we have the significant event here as well to the debate. And here we have a
court case.
Yes, so here we actually refer back to a court case that was imported.
One of the few court cases that already had a Wikidata item before this.
Yeah.
Before I started importing them.
And of course, that kind of, I think this was quite soon after the actual court case. Of course, some politicians get upset and want to change things, which is nice.
It wasn't actually the Wikipedia that was the target of that lawsuit, right? It was another site that was run by Wikimedia Sweden.
Yep.
That was falling under Swedish jurisdiction. Because I guess that's this Wikimedia Sweden would argue that Wikipedia does not fall under Swedish jurisdiction.
No, of course. And I think this might be a bit of a more complex. No, we already saw that one, I think. Did we? Yes, we did. We started there. So let's go to the minutes we imported, or you imported.
Yeah. So this is sort of peripheral content, I guess, but there are some interesting things in these protocols.
Yeah, and we have been using these a lot as sources for, because I think this is the only official source we have for who is replacing someone when they go on leave.
Exactly. So that's actually one of the few things, one of the main things that is lacking in the API of Riksdagen. You have all of the dates really neatly presented in tables and so on, but
yeah, you had one of those tables in a tab. Can you show that? Because I think that's could be neat to.
Absolutely. Can you see it?
Yep.
So this is one of the endpoints, as it's called in the API, where you just enter the numeric identifier of the MP, and you get this summary view. So this says that this is an ex-member of parliament. Doesn't say which party for some reason, but here we can see that it's the Liberals. Which electoral district, when she's born, that she's a woman, and then all of her positions, or So these are the list of the what are they called? Utskott.
Committees.
Yeah. Start time and end time, what role they had, and status. So this is a very nice view, but you can't see. So here it says she was she took a leave of absence between in September of 2014. And then whenever that happens, someone else steps in from the same parliament and the same electoral district. And what we would like to do, ideally, is to link those two together. So say that MP number 1 replaces MP number 2 until MP number 1 comes back again. But the only source of truth for that are the protocols, which are just plain text. So you have to look that up manually.
Yeah, and it can be quite hard also to find them, because sometimes they are well in advance and it's a planned absence of leave, or like they're like 2 months ahead. Say, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks or a month, or a parental leave for 3 months or something like that. And sometimes it's the same day if it's some emergency leave. So it can be hard to find it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, one could write some sort of, could be doable, writing a bot with all the variations, but it's a big project for the future.
And I'm going to show, here's another type of thing. These are the committee directives, and this is a recent one, trying to figure out how people will get access to the COVID-19 vaccines. So it's part of the series of the... What?
Is this when the government wants to do a public inquiry, they give specific directives to that inquiry?
Yeah. And of course, we can model this manually, the main subject being COVID-19 vaccine, that it has caused the pandemic. And then I believe that one causes, or is this a separate, did I go to a different topic here? This is another thing. So this could lead to an inquiry, but this is another, the forest fire inquiry of 2018. And we're going to see a few, of course, we don't have this in English. So a notable work, this produces a report, and it has the cause, the wildfires of Sweden, and it is the immediate cause of, and I think this has more or less the same title here, but it's just in Sweden, yeah. And this is the inquiry report. So we have a bit of tricky things, and this, of course, is based on some sort of legal basis, which is a directive then.
Yep.
So here we get a whole set of series of connected documents from different kinds of properties, linking them together in a chain.
Do we even on some of these, I don't know if we've added that, but I guess in the committees, we also have people serving on those committees that we could also add to them. Right? I think we've done that manually on a few occasions.
In some of them, yes.
That's sort of a tricky one, because you have these sort of well-known people heading the committees, but then you have these sort of helper roles. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but people who usually don't have a Wikidata item. But I think what we started doing is picking the committees with a single investigator. Those are usually high-profile people.
Yeah. So do we want to move over to your citation works, Daniel?
Sure.
So here's where some of the magic with these connections comes in.
Okay, should I add my screen maybe to stream? So you see it. All right, so we have all of these documents that we now have on Wikidata, and of course we want to understand how they cite each other. We've seen that these documents cite each other quite a lot. right? And the good thing is we have this in Wikidata, right? So we have already links to all the documents. We have so we have links to the documents. We have information about the documents, and we have this little property we call the legal citation of the text, which is quite useful. And recall, this is how usually these documents are then cited in other texts. There are a few variations to it, but it's relatively straightforward and similar to this. And so also other documents have these. So I don't know if you managed to catch that when we were going through, but if we look at one of these documents from the Parliament, they also have these very standardized formats. Yeah, for how they're supposed to be cited. So proposition. Oh, where did that go? Here. So this says it's the 2002-2003 legislative session, and it's the number 106, or proposition number 106 of that session, essentially.
I'm just going to pause you there because we got a very interesting question here from the chat. Is P800, which was the notable works, isn't it used outside its scope? And I'm not sure if it is. Like, I'm going to share my screen quickly here. So this is what it says. So notable work. We interpreted this that a committee could do notable work. So that's why we used it. But if you have any better suggestion, or if this shouldn't be used, we might go clean it up. But I think it's appropriate. Yeah,
and the committee could actually produce more than one report.
Yeah, they often do. All right, we'll let you back on.
Thanks. So we have these legal citations, and if we then pop over to one of our court cases, we can take the same one as we did before. You can see that this actually cites a proposition here. So it says proposition number 92 of the 1990-91 legislative session, and it's page 99. So what we can do is actually, since these are rather specialized, we can, or rather standardized ways of citing things, we could actually write a little scraper that goes through these documents, looks for anything that looks like one of these citations, and saves them, and then goes to Wikidata and looks up, hey, is there any document in Wikidata with this specific legal citation? And then we just add that with the bot, essentially, and once again with Wikidata integrator. So a lot of these public documents can actually be cited in that way. Of course, these cite also other documents that we can't do this manually. In this case, we have an actual. This is actually, I think, a book about, or a comment about a specific law in Sweden. So it's two academics who have written about that law and how it should be interpreted. So that is cited here, and that we currently can't do, partly because these comments are not in Wikidata, and partly because we don't have an easy way of recognizing this. But we can at least do it on these more standardized documents. And since we had all the documents in Wikidata, it was just a matter of actually querying Wikidata for all the court cases from Swedish courts, and then downloading those documents from the court website, running my script through it, identifying any of these citations, and then putting them up on Wikidata as an update to the item. So that's more or less what I did, both first for the court cases, and then once that worked well, I went on and did it for most of the parliamentary documents as well. I think not for the inquiries, perhaps. yet. So that's why Jan had gone through and done some manual work on that. So going back to perhaps to Fire or to the internet, the Wikidata, and seeing how this looks there. So if I then bring up that very same court case, you should be able to see how it cites that one. I think this should work to search for the case number. Well, no, it didn't work. Or maybe this is the one.
Oh, that's nice. You could search via the identifier?
Yeah, it usually works.
I think that works. You cannot do the has WB statement if you want to search for only a specific property. But this works. So here it is, yeah, Takla Korset, the leaking roof. Indeed, and we should be able to go down here and see that this now cites two different works, and we see it's added also the page 99 to this. So this is the proposition that it was citing, and if we open that up, we should see that indeed has that same number. It's from 1990. That looks promising, and yeah, it's the same one. So that's how I did it. And then I did the same thing for these propositions and motions as well. So you can go through, I downloaded this hypertext, in this case then, not the PDF, and then just went through and looked for any kind of references. And I think either this one is too old, so I didn't go through the oldest one with bad OCR to not create anything that would not be correct. So let's see if we have something newer also that is cited. Yeah, so this is a new one. This is a government report though. Oh. Yeah, I had something in my notes. No. So that's basically what I did was just run through all the documents and look for any citations, and if I found them, I added them. And then I guess the other things we did was adding the topics, as we mentioned, and the third thing would be the laws applied in court cases, which we currently have not been able to do programmatically, just because it's not a very nice way. It's usually just referred to the name of the law, or referred to by the name of the law, which is a bit hard to find. And it can also be that it says that this law does not apply. So just mentioning a law is not enough either to actually use that property.
Yeah, and I'll just share here this is the summary for motions, and you can see here how many sites you added the bulk of these. So it's around 16,000 citations. I might have added like in the orders of 300 by hand, but the bulk is from your bot.
And that's of course just you counted the number of documents that are cited, not the actual number of citations, because most of
they can have multiple, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is running live, right?
Sorry?
And this is running live, right? Is it?
No, it's not running live. It's
okay.
Running when I wanted to run, basically.
Yeah. But it's nice that we have this back and forth. We're adding new motions and other documents all the time, and you can run that citation script. And
yeah, I prepared a little bit of a query.
Just a question first, Daniel.
Sorry?
Just a question first for you. Like,
Yeah.
I see this has immediate cause. It's in the orders of 15,000. I guess that you run this med anledning av script
I
as
have not
well.
run that. I wonder if you have, or if Robin has maybe.
Yeah, I've run. So, are we looking at?
These are motions.
Yeah, I added that because they have this very specific and standardized way of phrasing the titles. If it's a follow-up motion, then you can sort of link the motions and propositions together using that.
So most of these 15,000 links are motions referring in their title back to a proposition or a bill.
Exactly.
All right. Let's see your query, Daniel.
Will that work? Yeah, so I did a quick query just to see which documents are the most cited ones, I think. And there are some really interesting things here, I guess. But some of them are directives for all committees. So every committee sort of cites those because this is what we had to work with. But then there are some other ones that are maybe not too surprising. This is the proposed budget for the government 1993-94. So of course the budget proposals do get quite a lot of citations because they are all encompassing, and every area of politics pretty much has to in some way work within the budgets that they have, and so those propositions get quite lengthy and they get cited a lot.
Yeah,
So
a lot of them are budgets there.
Yeah, indeed. And I think they started to, in later years, to actually split them into multiple documents, and therefore they don't pop up the same way. Of course, they are still being cited a lot. Here's one about was it corporate politics? Corporate policy.
Yeah, business politics and growth.
Something about changing the environmental regulation. About education, of course. About
our
economy.
Predecessor to GDPR.
Yeah, you're right. That's the implementation of the previous EU directive on that, right?
Yeah.
For GDPR. I forget the name of it.
And of course, joining the EU.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a big decision, obviously.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the EU. I guess that's sort of one of the next steps that we're looking at, is to start to tie this into European legislation also, because more and more, of course, of the legislative impetus for what is happening in Sweden in the legislature is coming from the European Union in the form of directives or other types of regulations from there. And so I think getting some of that tied up will be quite interesting to also start to model the broader landscape that Sweden is part of. Also getting the decisions of the European Court of Justice, for example, would be very interesting. I think that we didn't see much of that now, but in some of the cases, or quite a lot of the cases nowadays in the Swedish Supreme Court, it's actually just applying practice or case law from the European Court of Justice. And then the European Court of Human Rights would also be another one where you could look at that. So there are other courts, of course, in other countries, but also in Europe that could be very interesting to look at and copy some of these ideas for. And for some of the landmark decisions, there are already items on Wikidata, so we can look at the European Court of Human Rights, for example, and the case of Soring versus the United Kingdom, which is kind of a landmark case about extradition, I think. And currently these are very rudimentarily modeled and could definitely be improved quite a lot. You see they have Wikipedia articles, and they have an ECLI, and I think the format is maybe does not include these. But this is actually the ECLI, and if the website does not currently work for this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna share. Before we're moving on to the next thing, I'm just gonna share a little bit thing of how I've been doing. Sort of.
Actually, I see now. This is probably shouldn't have the country.
Aha.
I mean, United Kingdom was a party, but it's not really that the court decision of the European Court of Human Rights should have a country. It's maybe that the United Kingdom was a defendant in the case.
There we go. So let's see if I can share my screen here a little bit. So here we see one of the types of queries I've been using to find places to add topics. And it's basically, I'm trying to find, this is a very useful thing because they all have this Swedish Riksdag document identifier.
I like your hack, Jan,
yes.
to not include the potential initial capital letter there.
Yes, and I'm actually searching for a filter that has some sort of string that I sort of have an hunch that there might be topics in the title, and that also are topics in Wikidata. And this is sustainable development, but I'm writing it sustainable development to not filter out capital S in the beginning, and I run it. And let's see if this filters out. Yeah, so of course there's 151 things that haven't had their topics set yet. So I filter out anyone who had already got the topic so I can continue working on this. And here we see an example of the same query being entered year after year. And here's even by the party, which is quite interesting. So
sustainable development in Western Sweden.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different, and here we see also the types. So we have the motions, we have interpellations, there are bills, there are written questions, inquiry reports. So these I usually actually take a look at and see what do they cover. So this is query to actually find it, but then it's mostly manual work to add it. But for some topics, you can figure out exactly like, if it has this in the title, it's going to be the main topic. And then you can do another little hack, and I'm just going to share that because this was something that that my colleague Albin, who I'm editing Wikidata with, showed me, which sort of outputs things ready for with these two bind things. So now if I run this, I don't think I'm gonna get anything. So let's try this and go to try something else here. Good if I press the button in the right window. Only one result, but these are copy and pastable more or less into quick statements. Or rather, I'll download the CSV for this, and then copy and paste that into quick statements. So that gives you, if you can find a good topic area, then you can do it quickly. And with this, I think we're going to take a short break, but before that, what we showed here is mostly things that are in Wikidata. And we talked about how things are connected to each other. And we talked about you could query to see how much a committee or a person files motions over the years to find things out. And of course, this is sort of what Scholia already does for academics. So we started to think, hey, what if we can add views for politicians and politics in there? So after the break, we're going to be joined by Daniel Mietchen, and we're going to have a workshop. So we're not going to talk that much about how things are, or we rather talk how things are not and what we would like them to be. So please join us at 7 o'clock UTC. That is in 15 minutes. And we'll pick it up from there and try to collect some ideas on next steps for Scholia and politics. And thank you, Robin and Daniel, for showing the work so far. You are more than welcome to stay around and bounce ideas after the break.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to see if I can add some pause music. Stop. I'm going to share screen again. Yes, so we'll be back after a short break.
Yummy.
All right. Oh,
We're back.
and we're back from the break, and we're joined by Daniel Mietchen. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you well. All right. So I'm not sure if you managed to catch anything from our first part of this session. No.
No,
So
nothing. I just joined because I had to try to put my kids to bed.
Yeah. Did it work?
Somewhat.
All right. So we have been giving an introduction to the work we have been doing with adding parliamentary documents into Wikidata, the politicians, and how they are also linked together, sometimes with citations, sometimes how they are causing. Oh, are you okay, Daniel?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. It's just the camera. So, but this brings us to our next step in our goals, because we were thinking about how can we make this visible in a better way. And first we were thinking, hey, should we build a tool for this? And then we realized there is already some kind of tool for visualizing this kind of sort, which is, for you who don't know, Scholia. Do you want to give a quick introduction to Scholia, Daniel?
I just closed my browser where I had this because I'm giving a poster on this tomorrow, so I'm really in the mode. But depends on how much time you give me. So in short, it is a mechanism to make use of the linked open data nature of Wikidata. So if we take, for instance, a publication, and we know that the publication has an author, and we know that the author is affiliated with a certain institution, then Scholia makes it easy to link the publication with the institution, and similar kinds of things. So things that are distantly related, like several steps away, but still linked in the linked open data graph, they can be pulled together by Sparkle queries, and that is something that the Scholia tool kind of semi-automates and makes it configurable. And also the basic idea is applicable to all sorts of different domains, but Scholia was built for scholarly literature. And on that basis, we can then think of expanding the concept. There is actually a very similar tool for lexemes that does essentially the same thing for lexemes. It's called Ordia, by the same main developer, and it applies the same idea. We ask certain kinds of standard questions about a certain concept. In that case, it's certain, like it's languages or grammatical features or things like that. And then you translate that question into a Sparkle query, and then you put that Sparkle query into the tool, and then you make the Sparkle query customizable by a Wikidata identifier. And then whenever you call the tool with that Wikidata identifier, you get that profile with those predefined queries. And the same thing happens with Scholia, where we have profiles that can take the perspective of an author. So they can look at the thing that you use it for as an author, as a topic, as a chemical, as a gene, as an event, all sorts of things. And I think for you, the most interesting view is the author view that you have opened here right now. And yeah, I'm happy to walk through that. But I guess the most interesting things are where the tool doesn't really work for right now, right? Because that's where you want to come in and you want to discuss how best to tweak things. Or maybe we can start with those things where it works already somewhat, but you would like to have it tweaked a little bit.
Yeah, and I also want to give an invitation to everyone who is watching as well. Feel free to comment here or in the chat, but even better, we have set up an Etherpad where we will try to collect ideas we get today. So this will sort of be, we will of course present a little bit of what the tool does, but what we really want to get out of this is getting input from you so that we can go further than we started. But yeah, I just plugged in here one of the politicians into the authors, and it was sort of an experiment when we had imported a few documents, and the nice thing is some things actually happen. So
yeah, can you give me the link to the Etherpad as well, because I put in a query there, and I know you gave me the link earlier, but right now I don't have it.
Yeah, I'll copy it over to the chat there, so you also have it. There you go.
Yes. Okay. So and then maybe we can look at that query as well, because that gives us a list of potential candidates to look at, and almost all of them are Swedish, which already highlights that your project was kind of active.
Mm-hmm. So let's see if I can get the link to work there. You made Listeria here.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So you get the Scholia link there. Yes.
Yeah, and so maybe we can use that to browse certain things.
Ooh,
and
yes.
Also, by looking at some of the non-Swedes, I think we found some edge cases that are useful to discuss. And there's apparently one person that has a Swedish name, but no country of citizenship logged, or several of those even. So that's something for the people who are on the call.
Yeah.
and don't talk. That's easy to fix.
Yes.
So if you're a parliamentarian, you should have Swedish citizenship, I guess. Otherwise, you're not.
Yeah, I guess so, but I didn't feel comfortable making those edits, so
no.
I didn't touch it. Yeah, so you could, for instance, start sorting by just nationality or by any of those things that you care about. Even the Scholia profile. So if you start by if you sort by Scholia profile, that gives you sorting by Wikidata ID, which is some sort of an importance measure as well.
Does Scholia handle this kind of large counts well?
Well, let's have a look.
All right, let's have a look. We got a nice little introduction here that I guess this is auto description of some sort.
Yeah, no, it's pulled from English Wikipedia, but that's something we could, in principle, pull from any Wikipedia. And there is one of the grants that we have approved, or I think it was an e-fellowship, is actually about making this internationalization easier. So they will prototype this with Kinyarwanda. And once we have that customizable for Kinyarwanda, we can adapt it to any other language. And so that part is relatively straightforward, but they're mostly concerned with just pulling in the Wikipedia entry if it exists in the local language. There are many other aspects that could be more localized, like the number of publications per year kind of thing. And yeah, there are other things. So one thing to note is, for instance, in the first table, maybe we go through this table by table, and we just mention our observations, and then hopefully someone will note this down in a way that can then trigger further action. So you notice 2 columns that are empty, pages and venue, because they kind of assume that what we're looking at is a scholarly publication, which would typically be, it comes in 3 main types. It's either a book, or it's a journal article, or it's a conference proceeding. And the journal article, all 3 of them have pages, like how many pages does this thing have? Venue is for the conference proceeding, it's the conference. For the journal article, it's the journal. And for the book, it's not entirely clear. It might be the publisher or nothing. But here, we could kind of twist the data model a little bit and then say the venue is the Swedish Riksdag or something like this.
Possibly, yeah.
Or maybe proceedings, or whatever the official bulletin is where they publish their stuff.
Yeah.
And it probably has a number of pages, so that could be filled in. But maybe it doesn't have a number of pages because it was filed as an electronic document or something. No, well, not in '94 probably. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that is negotiable in principle. And yeah, so the question then is whether you need to adapt this. So if we go to the under the author, we could think of something like member of parliament kind of aspect instead of author. And then we can customize it entirely to our liking, or we can see to what extent we can actually tweak the author aspect such that it fits your use case better. These are the 2 options.
Yeah, I think author is quite interesting, because you can see here over time they vary. We happen to take one of the parties that usually have a lot of like all of them on the same motion, whereas some parties don't do that and they have more individual motions. So this is a bit of an edge case here, but you can see it hasn't been the same over time either. So
yeah, but if you click on this list of people, then that gives you another view. That gives you the comparison view of these things, which might actually be interesting from a political science perspective. Like scroll down, then once it actually loads, you see basically the collaboration happening between here. If it's all 8 always the same time, this might be the case where, and here the time pattern comes in. Because not everybody sits in the same parliament all the time, so there are certain defined end and start dates, and so there might be some correlations also when the government shifts and those kinds of things. I guess, do we have a political scientist here who can comment on the usefulness of these things?
I just noticed one thing in this one. Let's see if it loads back here again, because you could actually notice when we had this person as in his single view, you could see from the time pattern a certain kind of event in his career. Okay. So he went from being the middle author to being the first author when he was elected the party leader. And then he became first author, and then he stopped being party leader, and then he's not in first author anymore. So you can see his political career reflected in this.
Yeah, nice. That's not why we built it, but that's a side effect. And actually, it's similar for scientists. Most scientists, although the color or the order would be different, most scientists start off with maybe something in the middle, and then they need some first author papers in order to get their PhD. And then the middle author papers, they kind of come in, and the last author paper is once you're a professor, and occasionally they have a solo author paper. That's why we chose this kind of visualization.
We also got a question here related to the first, like, would it make sense counting words or characters rather than pages?
Yeah, probably. The reason why we have pages is because that's usual in bibliographic contexts. So if you're citing something, a journal article or a book chapter, it's usually expressed in some sort of pages kind of thing. So it's from page 752 until 68 or something like this, which is why we have that. And the number of pages is actually a different, in Wikidata it's implemented as a different thing, because the statement about what the start page and the end page of let's say a journal article is often very ambiguous. And also, especially in earlier times when the journals were primarily printed, you have cases where the journal article starts at some page and then it ends at some page because the next page is some advertisement, and then it continues at some point, or they put the graphics somewhere else because they had to fit it on where they had space in the paper. And so it's not a simple subtraction of start page and end page. It's sometimes really more complex. And so right now we're treating this as two different properties, but I hope that at some point we can actually merge them. And but I've looked into this a little bit, and I found someone who is actually an occasional Wikidata contributor who wrote their PhD thesis about essentially this kind of problem. And one of the problems he looked at in detail was the different ways in which the number of pages are indicated for different kinds of resources. And I think he found 400 different ways in which, like, the page numbers are indicated.
Yeah. Finn gives us a short answer here that the pages is from a Wikidata property, so we don't actually have the character count right now.
Yeah, we don't have it, but it's doable. If we want the character count, we could do it. And also, if the motion is short enough to fit into, let's say, a single string or something, we could do some string acrobatics on it. But right now we don't have it. From the Scholia perspective, we have a ticket open to think about pulling in the abstracts of things that are openly licensed. In many cases, they are just not openly licensed, and that's why it just wasn't a thing to think about yet. But maybe we can pull in those that are in the public domain, and then we can prototype this kind of thing. Some of the motions that you have in Parliament, they're rather short, but many of them are like 100 pages or something, and that certainly shouldn't be expressed as a single string, because that then really makes the parsing problematic.
Yeah. I've seen that we have the ones that are like 2 or 3 tweets long, like one, certainly under 1,000 characters long. But then we also see the ones that are like the shadow budget, which could be a couple of 100 pages. Yeah,
I actually think motions or changes to the law, they should be handled like pull requests on GitHub. You should have the law in a shared repository. Doesn't have to be GitHub, but something version available aware, and then any changes should be proposed as essentially pull requests.
That's not too different from how the format is done in Sweden, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not too different how it's actually working in the EU. They actually have a software that works similar to that.
Okay. Well, I've never had that close my hands on the law, but what I hear from the legal process, I always feel it's so disconnected. At least they don't make it easy for you as a citizen to find out, because already as a researcher, I hate this phrase. For instance, all applicable law. Right now, it's used in the Corona context. You have to ensure. Also, you have to sign it when you're you got a grant. Then at some point you have to sign that you will observe all applicable law, and nobody can give me the button where I press to see what's all applicable law and all of that. We should move forward, and I actually think you doing this kind of indexing of political documents is a good step in this direction, because in the end I want essentially all policy, all law to be queryable in the same manner we can query for like the soccer champions or similar things. Why should it be more complex to ask for applicable law than for some soccer champion kind of stuff? I just don't get it, and so I'm very interested in moving this forward and thinking about how we can make like legal political documents more machine friendly. And also, if, for instance, if you're a foreigner in Sweden and you don't know Swedish, then you could still try with English, I suppose. But if you don't know that, then you have a hard time. But through Wikidata, you could essentially start in Indonesian and then take a detour via Hebrew, and it would essentially still work, right?
Yeah.
And that's another aspect. So I only took it when I was a student. I only took one course in law, which was a comparison of constitutions of European countries. And for back then, I had no idea what semantic web was, but I was wishing for a tool to help me compare those. Because if you try to extract the elements that they put into these constitutions, then they are similar. There are things like freedom of speech and things like that. And so in a way, you could annotate them, yeah, has freedom of speech or something like this, or you break it down into more granular components. And I'm quite sure some lawyers and legal scholars are working on these kind of things. It's just so far away from what I know about that I just don't know it. And I would be very glad to link with these people, because the basic tooling that we have now, it would allow this kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit, like what these are showing here. The co-author graph. That's
Yes.
more or less another visualization of what we saw in the table above, I guess.
Yeah, but in the table above, you saw the most recent ones, and here you see the most prominent co-authorships. So we pick, I think, the most 25 most prominent or something like this, and then their most prominent co-authors. So that it could be that you see someone here in this graph that doesn't appear above in the table because they haven't published recently or something like this.
Yep. And the colors are gender?
Yeah, with the white ones, meaning that either gender is not indicated or there was a recent merge or something.
We also experimented a bit with doing similar graphs with party identification as the coloring.
Yeah, I think for party, I would suspect we need to do a separate aspect. So a political party kind of aspect, similar to the things we have for chemical compounds. And then you can ask all sorts of questions about this. And yeah, that's entirely doable. We would just need someone to essentially sit down, write down the questions. What kind of questions would you like to ask of a political party? How can you ask those questions such that they're applicable across jurisdictions? And then we translate it to Sparkle, and then we have a draft of that prototype of that profile. My goodness.
You mentioned something very important there, the applicability across jurisdictions.
Yeah.
A major headache for extending this.
Yeah, sure. Like in Germany, we have a 5% hurdle for all parliaments, or most parliaments, essentially, which means that if your party gets less than 5% of the votes, then they will send nobody into parliament. And then in countries like the US, they essentially have just two parties. There are a few more that exist, but they never get votes, or at least very rarely. And then the question is, how do you represent that, and so on. And then, of course, things change. Some people even change parties in the middle of a parliament season, and all sorts of things happen. Okay, topic scores. Yeah, here you notice something that this is already in Swedish. This is because the Sparkle queries are in, they use Autolang. So if the item has a description in Swedish, it will show you the results in Swedish. Yep. So that part is internationalized already, and so I think that's nice. But what we haven't internationalized in a similar fashion is the headers, like the topics, topic section, topic scores. We're thinking about doing this, but we haven't found a good way of going about doing this. We probably need a separate wiki base or something like, or we could or a separate Scholia-related Wikidata property or something like this. But right now we don't have it.
Yeah. And here's like a short insight is that it seems like this person is very interested in conscription in Sweden, but actually it's sort of like the opposite. I think he actually want to abolish it.
Yeah, but that's a certain interest as well, though, so I don't think that's incorrect.
Yeah, here we get it in English.
Yeah, for some reason here it's in English. Maybe that's something we should look into, why it pops up in English here and in Swedish up there. But yeah, that should be easy to fix. And if someone comes there with I always browse Scholia in English, so I don't notice these things. But if someone were to review Scholia pages from the perspective of reusability in different languages, that's a kind of thing to notice. And it's really easy to fix, actually. So that shouldn't be a problem. Also interesting about the tagging, I just saw that one of the topic tags was South Yemen. So this speaks to the timing. We're still, because South Yemen ceased to exist in 91, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually checked the first picture of that guy, which is from my country. Yeah, okay. So citation statistics.
Yeah, not too many.
That's probably kind of useful already. I mean the map above. The map above is already kind of useful. Yeah, locations. I didn't see that one. I was when you were scrolling the map. But what we were asking, if you check the query, what we're asking there is some things like place of birth and death and these kind of things, which are personal and should be independent roughly of whether you're a researcher or not, or a politician. But we are also asking for like membership in national academies and these kind of things, which might not be so applicable to politicians.
Yeah, I got a little bit interested in this and was thinking about it was also interesting to see like this person had topics South Yemen and Chile, and also see that on the map. And I think this is sort of doing it. Let's see, is this a person? So let's see if I can change here. Was it only
if you had an MEP or a former MEP, would they also show Brussels on the map?
Let's see if this works. I already had a result here from someone who had something like a motion about Western Sahara.
Okay. That was a motion in the Swedish Parliament about West Sahara. Okay.
Yeah, and about the Baltic Sea. Well, let's run again with this. See if South. Oh, right. Yes, very diverse.
South Yemen and Cairo.
And Yemen. This is UNESCO something.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, so UNESCO has two.
Yeah. Okay.
Or probably three.
That's Paris as well. Yeah. Okay.
Then we had the Baltic Sea here. And then the same, the other.
Yeah, so these map queries are essentially relatively straightforward because we don't have a lot of data there, especially if we're looking for a single person. It's relatively straightforward to essentially query for everything that is directly linked from their profile, like from their Wikidata item, and has a geo ID, geolocation. That shouldn't be a very expensive query, and so we could look into that. The problem with the maps is once you do it for many different items, like we do on a topic profile or something like this, then sometimes they get expensive.
Yeah.
So my question, coming back to that again, do you see now already which parliaments they've been part of? So if they've been MEPs, will we see Brussels and Strasbourg, for example?
That's a good question. So we should
look
put
at someone
in...
like Carl Schlyter, perhaps, who has been both in Swedish
Parliament. So we search over here.
MEP.
and then we'll scroll down to the map. There we go.
Another thing, while we're waiting for the queries to load, at the very bottom we have a link to the missing pages that Finn was also briefly explaining. I'm not sure whether you were in his session. So the this helps with curation. So yeah, there is nothing
right?
in.
Wait.
This looks like this could be Brussels, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Brussels. This is Strasbourg. But I was
okay.
But I was more thinking about. I wonder if my map was slow to update. Now it seems to completely. It looked like Miami University is completely.
That's Miami, Ohio, perhaps.
Aha, another Miami. There are too many Miamis.
Oh yeah, it's yeah.
It's how they trick people.
Disambiguation. That's why we have these identifiers.
Yeah.
Work location. Yeah, sounds about right for a politician.
Yeah. We have a Brussels and we have a Strasbourg.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably
good.
somewhere in here. We don't have the Stockholm Parliament though.
Yeah. Well.
Yep.
Easy to fix.
Yep. That's just missing data.
Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to show, if you scroll to the very bottom of the author page, then there should be a link missing, just above the events table.
That?
Yes, and then open this. And that gives you, this is optimized, of course, for scholarly things, and it asks you for like basically publications that have the same author name string as the ones that are known for this particular person. It also gives you options to create the co-authors, which might be interesting for some of those parties where they do this joint authorship kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, some of the motions that he authored don't have a main subject indicated. So that's the kind of curation questions that we produce like by default for authors. And this could be easily extended to take into account more of your politician's use case.
Yeah.
And we have similar missing pages for some of the other aspects as well, like topic or organization or things like that. And this helps to prioritize actually the curation.
Yeah.
So maybe, I guess you have something like Jan Andersson or something, of which you have 15 or so that have ever sat in the Swedish Parliament.
Probably.
And so for this kind of thing, the co-authors usually help with the disambiguation. And then, of course, timing, if you have time information or any additional things, one of them was really interested in conscription.
Yeah.
And the other one preferred to work on whatever food law or whatever. And but these missing pages, they assist with that.
Yeah. Right. So let's see if someone added something here. Not yet. All right. So we started to think about it. Of course, we're creating an issue on GitHub. Seems like an appropriate start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wrote down a few ideas here, and let me zoom in a little bit so people can actually see what's written here. So we were thinking about, oops, too much, perhaps. No, this might be good. Like a politician, we could obviously reuse a lot from the author view as it is, because a lot of it is already good. But then, of course, there's some things that we might want to add, like which parliament has this politician been in, or which government, if the person was a minister or something like that. That's also could be possibly a bit tricky depending on the political systems, I guess.
Yeah.
And then perhaps positions held. You want to see if the person was perhaps started a career in the municipality and then went up to the national parliament and then perhaps became a minister of some sorts, or were in a
we have some
committee.
timelines in the profiles already, and so
Great.
these should be relatively straightforward to adapt. Right now,
Yeah.
I think we look at things like first publication, last publication, most publication of most cited article, but we also look at times when they got an award and times when they changed affiliation. So this should be straightforward to adapt to cases where they change the parliament or the party or something like this.
Yeah, you might almost want to have every election as an event there, right? So elected to
yeah, significant event would be an election or someone stepping down.
Yeah. And we're also thinking about did we? I think, yeah, elections, yes. That was something new. And then we wanted to extend the locations there like we were thinking about.
You have a question in the Telegram group, John, about if we are adding the translations of laws in minority languages to the document.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think that's actually in the main API. So I'm gonna, no, I don't think that. Perhaps we can have Robin in the chat and see if he knows anything more about that, but I don't think the translations of the laws are easily available. They should be available somewhere, because I think the laws at least are published in all our 5 minority languages. But I'm not sure.
Do we have Wikipedias for all of them?
No, I think we have Wikipedias for 3 or 4 of them. So the minority languages in Sweden are Finnish, Yiddish,
Russian, maybe?
no, it's Sami, yeah, and Mietchen, and Romani. So I think perhaps only Mietchen is missing, but then of course Sami is several different languages, and I think we have only 2 Wikipedias. We got
I think Mietchen has one of those incubators or something like that.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, Wikidata is rather independent of that. We can start in Wikidata handling all of those languages almost immediately, basically, right? And once we have a decent corpus there, maybe that also helps getting some projects in the incubator move a bit faster or something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we can see from this is, all right, we have an answer here. Yeah. So Robin, who was here, says we need to investigate that. Some laws are available in English. I think you also found a document, Daniel, where we had some general legal terms, which also had some of the laws in English.
Speaking of legal terms, it would be nice also to get all the let's see, the lexemes in those motions into Wikidata.
Yes.
Especially those from the title, but in principle, all of them. Because that's this legalese that is always hard to understand, even if you speak the language fluently. But Wikidata helps with, or can help with that, if properly annotated. If the terms are properly extracted and then annotated in Wikidata, then someone who doesn't know Swedish could find their way, and someone who does know Swedish but not legalese, they would have an assistant. So that's certainly an area that I think is very fruitful.
Yeah, let's see if we can show an example here, because one of the great things with this is that we with the links from these documents to the source texts, it was easy to make like these usage examples and refer to where it came from, because we had the acts like this.
I saw those, and one problem I have with those is the same for other quotes. What if the source document is not in the public domain?
Yes. So this is the good thing with these, that the laws and the motions are actually, so we can click through on these. So if you go to this one,
Swedish Act on Copyright. Oh, that, and it's not copyrighted? That would be nice.
It is not copyrighted. So the laws are exempt. This one didn't mention it. Let's go to another.
But is that actually internationally valid? Sometimes, like for us, for the Wikimedia purposes, if you want to store a copy of that law on Commons, would this also be considered public domain in the US if it's a Swedish law? Has that been sorted out?
I'm pretty sure, because let's see if we can go from this one, which is another. So this one is stated in something.
That's a great use of these sources. We should do that more often. I've tried to use the Scholia articles in a similar fashion. So for certain topics related to disasters, I've indexed essentially all the single word lexemes that I could find in whenever they were mentioned in publications, like reports or journal articles. But we don't have good tooling for that. So someone who is a computational linguist or so would be very welcome to join these efforts, maybe guide them.
So here we have the exemption in the copyright law that these are actually exempt of copyright in Sweden. But I guess that if it wasn't copyrighted in the first place, could it be in copyright in US?
I think there are some quirks that would allow that. And so we have to keep that in mind when dealing with those things. There are a number of situations where something is in copyright in some country, even if it's not in copyright in the source country. And I've stumbled upon this usually from the Commons perspective, so from images. But I think it does pop up in Wikisource as well for some texts. But I'm not an expert on this. I just kind of know that this exists as a problem space.
All right, that's a little bit deeper than I thought. I thought it was easy when they're not copyrighted in Sweden. Yeah.
No, it's similar to like the different open licenses are not all compatible. Yep. And there are different shades of public domain. Also, there are different shades of copyright. Like, for instance, in Germany, basic copyright doesn't exist because we have creator rights, and they're kind of. It's a different way of thinking about the same thing, and some of those can be easily translated from one perspective into another, and others cannot. And some of those laws you can, or rights you can waive, some of them you cannot. Like if I'm a creator of a document, according to German law, I will remain that creator, whatever the copyright might be. And that then means certain things. Okay.
Yeah. So here I was playing around a little bit, like figuring out how could we populate something about elections for a person. And now we don't have a lot of data for that yet in Wikidata.
Elections should be reasonably well covered in Germany, like at least the major, the national ones. And here I actually think election would be a different aspect. Yeah. So, but you might want to show some election-related stuff in the profiles of the politicians. So that's your focus right now. But in principle, I think elections would be a different aspect where you then say, oh, that was the time period. These were the parties that were running. These were the offices that were at stake, and that kind of thing. This was the mode of voting. And these were the criteria for being eligible to stand for candidate, or these kinds of things, right? That would be on a profile for an election. but for a politician, maybe what should it say? There could be just one panel that says the elections they participated in, and then whether they won or not, or whatever their rank was in the competition. No, we don't have direct elections in Germany, so that doesn't give you very much. No, but
Give me 26 results.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
There are copies. I didn't do this. No, they're different.
looks good in principle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has stood for candidate a number of times, but then she was elected into the Bundestag, which is our Riksdagen. And then the Bundestag, together with the other parliament, elected her as chancellor or as minister. She was appointed minister by the previous chancellor and things like that.
Oh, yes. Great. Thank you, Phoebe. We got some links for election pages in the Etherpad now.
Okay, good.
And here we have it in English. Yeah.
Template tonight. Okay.
So should we do just a quick brainstorming here about what kind of aspects would be interesting? So we had the party, we had the elections. What other things could be interesting from a politics kind of way?
I think all aspects of the election process could be. So it could be the parliament itself, like the number of seats, number of parties, then whatever other roles there are, and how that changed over time.
Yeah.
Maybe a legislative session?
Yeah, well, I don't know how these things are called, but yes.
Like the 25th Congress of the United States or whatever.
Or
yeah, something like this.
Something like that.
Then what I would like to see is also like the best before end date of any legal documents. In many jurisdictions, laws are being passed under the assumption that they will be valid until eternity, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cases, they are actually passed with a certain kind of remark, or they're earmarked for review in 3 years or in 10 years or in 8 years or something like this. So
would that be like even like some sort of legal calendar per jurisdiction?
Something like this, yeah. Like, what are the laws that are up for review in the next year or something? That would be a very useful tool to have. And once we have the data in Wikidata, that would be very simple to implement. It's just that we don't have the data. And so we probably also need an aspect for just a legal document. We already have work, but that's kind of academia focused.
Yeah.
And
I think I had an example here. This is one work here. I had it in, and let's see.
Something that worked really well that I played around with here was the similarities. So finding similar documents through the citations, for example.
Yeah. And like legal documents, they cite each other as well, and they cite the literature occasionally, like the scientific literature or other pieces of literature occasionally. So that part should, in principle, work if there is a source to pull these citations from. And apparently that seems to be the case. Yeah, so you can identify this law from 1991 that is highly cited, and that probably tells you something. That is probably something that political scientists would have some use for.
Yeah.
And then you could, that's something that I'm still kind of trying to find out for the classical Scholia. If we had a mechanism to basically go through all those panels and then identify the politicians which consistently are co-authors of those highly cited motions, or the other way around, the topics that consistently rank amongst the highly cited motions or something like this, which basically means we would have to sum up over a number of panels in a number of profiles of a number of Wikidata items. And that's the kind of thing that typically times out if we do it all in one query. But if we think about intermediate steps and maybe putting some query results into a Wikibase and then querying that Wikibase in a second step, that kind of summary statistics could also be done.
I just want to plug Robin, who was on here before. In his work, he's been doing this tool, the election tracker.
Okay.
This is using data from Wikidata. So here's upcoming elections that Wikidata know of.
Oh, please put a link into the Etherpad.
I will put it in.
And that's upcoming national elections, right?
Ooh, I don't know.
Or what?
Parliamentary election, presidential election, legislative election.
Because on the planet there's essentially an election every week.
Yeah, probably.
Because there's so many different jurisdictions.
Yeah, well, 28 elections in 3 months. I guess that's more than one per week.
That's the typical data sparsity in Wikidata, but it shows the principle. That's nice.
I will wonder how many items there really are for the US election. There's probably items for like the Senate election in Georgia and things like that as well, right?
And there should be in principle. If we want to take this serious from the Wikidata perspective, then every election should, that is kind of covered by law, should have its item. I'm not talking about the election of your local gardening association. That does not necessarily need a Wikidata item, but everything that is mandated by law, I think should have. And I would like to see a similar thing for the expiry date of certain legal things. Also the budget. There's a very nice a bug report or a ticket on GitHub about the US government occasionally shutting down.
All right.
And they managed to bring the ship almost to a crash. They typically come to a solution just a few hours or sometimes minutes before the deadline, which is a completely crazy way to run a country. That's just the way they do it. And in many other cases, those deadlines for review, they just pass without the public noticing. And then the politicians that are aware of it, they use this to just make things a bit more problematic for the populace. And so if the let's say the relevant dates for any laws, or also when there is some sort of a public consultation or so, these kind of things, if that would be more easily indexable, that could actually help enhance broader participation by the citizenry.
I know, especially last spring, in March, April, May, a lot of laws related to the pandemic had expiry dates. They were put in until August or September, October, and then they have been up for review. And we just imported this early, a bill that was the recent one. And when Robin showed off what it was actually extension of one of these laws.
And extensions, that's essentially like a version. We have the preprint, and then we have the final article, and then we have the corrigendum. This kind of, the motion would be the preprint, then we have the law, and then we have the corrigendum or the extension. These kind of things, there should be some mechanism by which we link those different documents. Right now, we haven't fully figured this out for the scholarly documents. But for the legal ones, I think it's a bit better defined, and so it should be more easy to figure it out.
I think there's a property for that for legal, amended by or something like that.
Okay, good.
We should have the other direction as well, amends.
Probably they should be reciprocal.
It's nice. We're having a few people helping us out here in the document. Phoebe
Yeah.
says, yeah, it's quite difficult to find some of these information. How, and I guess that's a problem for scaling this work, getting it, because that's also, Daniel, you might, or Robin could also perhaps expand it perhaps in the chat. Because now we made a one-time import, but how do we keep this data up to date, and when there's adding more motions and stuff like that? And I guess you have been thinking about that, Daniel, as well, with importing new academic resources.
Yeah, I think the one-off things and the regular things, it's probably useful to keep them separate, to treat them as separate things. And I'm personally more interested in the long-term thing, because if you have that going, it doesn't matter how big or small the initial one-off thing was. And the consistency of the long-term thing is more crucial than the data quality of the very first import. But in general, of course, if you start with like 1 billion documents and they're bad quality and badly annotated, then that's a very bad start. But as long as we keep the typical approach, like first do like 1 manually, then maybe 10 in using quick statements, and then like 100 or 1,000 using some kind of bot, and then scale up, that should be fine. Another thing that I have in my mind right now is sometimes we have questions like, for instance, where should the servers of the Wikimedia Foundation stand? And we just recently, like a few weeks ago or so, we had a discussion about this. And most of the time, this then is not a very well-informed discussion, but it, for instance, would be very nice if we could just run a query to Wikidata, like which countries have net neutrality or net neutrality laws with certain specifications that we would want for the place that hosts the Wikimedia servers and this kind of thing. Or which countries have motions like bills in the legal process that affect this in one way or another. And right now, there's nobody that's keeping track of this in a way that I would know. Well, it's not my area of expertise, so maybe it exists. But Wikidata would be a tool that could do this. And so we could demo this.
Yeah. I know, I happen to live in Amsterdam right now, so I know that the province of South Holland are building a tool. It's meant initially to help them keep track of what environmental acts are applicable to a certain area.
Applicable law, okay, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
so they can actually click a point on a map and see all things that are covered by that. But of course, when they started with that, they realized, why just add the environmental things? Let's add all the laws that has a coverage. So they are building that as we speak, because they have a new law coming in effect. I'm not sure exactly if it's in 6 or 12 months or something like that. So by then it's going to be ready. So that might be interesting to see in what way we could connect something to that or not.
Yeah, maybe build it in. Let them use Wikidata identifiers for all the elements in their ontology. That would be very nice.
And we saw also Robin here said the long-term plan is to add all parliamentary documents via a bot in the cloud. For now, semi-manually.
So this is about the Swedish project or the Amsterdam
Yeah, that's
one?
about the Swedish for now, then, where we actually know the status of the API and the copyright.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's similar for the court rulings that I do as well. That since I only managed to automate 95% or so of that, it still requires some of my hands to actually finish up the
Yeah,
items.
court ruling is something that I have actually occasionally looked into. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, the Urgenda case, and I'm wondering, like, where is the cutoff here? Like, I think every ruling by the Supreme Court in every country is probably a Wikidata notable, but then do we want to go down to every court case in every court in every country? And there I'm getting afraid a bit. And also, I have no idea about privacy implications and what kind of or what part of that is already public data and what part of that is available via some sort of API and things like that. And I have no idea. What are your thoughts on this?
So we talked a bit about this earlier for the Swedish case, at least, and it was a lot of downloading PDFs from the Supreme Court website and actually reading through this with the help of a Python script. But the good things on privacy is that they are already scrubbed of all person names, for example. So there's only legal entities that are mentioned by name in those, and the plaintiffs are usually referred to by their initials, for example.
Yeah,
That problem.
It's a tricky question, but I guess if we start with the Supreme Courts, that will, for a starter, be a lot valuable, because I guess that most of the things that we're connecting it to right now are actually, like, between laws and motions and bills, are connected to Supreme Courts rather than lower courts, because you don't need to change the law if it hasn't been up to the Supreme Court and shown to be wrong or correct or have a quirk that you need to fix. We have a few comments here in the chat. Phoebe says that in the US, they charge a lot for the special databases, so finding applicable law is very hard. Whereas Finn says in Denmark, the court cases are anonymized, so there's some potential for them.
Especially in the federal system, I guess, Phoebe, it gets really hard because you have different levels of legislations.
Yeah, and then consider federal states that have multiple languages, and that just adds to the fun. Yeah, I've looked into, like, the open budget of India. So there is a group in India that produces a national open budget based on the budgets on a per state level, and yeah, they are typically released in different languages, and so that was a fun parsing PDF documents in a dozen different languages, and then trying to fit that into one consistent data model. And that was mainly budgets. So if you then consider that legal documents are mostly text, that is way more complex.
All right, we're actually at time already. We have gotten a bunch of good comments and ideas into and links in our Etherpad. And we also came up with a few. I'm just going to look if we have anything outstanding in the chat. Not there, not any comments here. All right. I want to thank you, Daniel for helping me out with this presentation and or rather workshop brainstorming.
Yeah, if you happen to organize something like a hackathon to actually try to implement something like that, I think we from the Scholia team, we would be glad to participate in some way. And yeah, details to be worked out.
Yes, that sounds like a very nice idea. Let's plan that a little bit farther in the future so we can actually arrange something.
Yeah. And also watch out for others that are doing legal stuff. So with the example query that I gave you, we saw that there are lots of legal motions by ancient Chinese scholars or something that are somehow in a database. And I suspect there will be some similar nuggets in the corpus already, because this means that there are other communities that have similar interests or use cases, which we could then connect to in order to make the new, let's say, politician Scholia profiles more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, with the project Every Politician and what's coming out after that, and we also recently saw import of statutories from somewhere in the UK. I'm not sure if it was the national or if it was regional, but it was like some import going on there as well. So it's popping up in different
Well,
places.
someone got a WikiCite grant. Forget the name for importing
Yes, the
Brazilian
Brazil.
balls.
Yeah, yep, that's it as well. All right, but with that, I say thank you to you again, and for everyone who has watched us, and I wish you a good WikiCite continued.
Okay.